So how did food become the lens through which you started to understand all these? Like, why did you get there? And why does it make sense to you, I suppose?
Yeah, in some ways it was an accidental journey, and I did quite a lot of progressive politics, left wing politics in India, along with studying political philosophy, which is what I was interested in. But when I came to do my PhD at SUNY Binghamton, because SUNY Binghamton had kind of a group of scholars like Emmanuel Wallerstein, Giovanni Arrighi, who were writing in journals like the New Left Review. I was familiar with their work, and so I had applied there. And what I was struck quite quickly was that I had not thought about cooking and feeding and all the work that goes into cooking. And that was obviously a very South Asian male privilege. And that startled me. I said, wow, what else is hidden in plain view?
Yeah.
And so that became a kind of an opening in my case to think about the quotidian, the everyday social relationships of cooking and feeding. And initially, I was not intending to work on necessarily food, partly because there was very little work on food. And maybe we'll get a chance to talk about it today. But eventually, I ended up working on food and the social world of largely the labor that goes into any food system.
Yeah. So in the migrants table, I think you wrote that in 2004. You've looked at, I think, meals and memories in a Bengali American household. Now, what was it in that, on those kitchens that the books weren't teaching you? What is it that was surprising? Because, I mean, to me, I had certain preconceived notions about Bengali food, to be honest with you. But when I was reading your data, I was a little surprised myself. But what was it that you found in those kitchens in that study that you didn't?
Yeah, the first thing is I did this work in sociology, and sociology was relatively slow to come to cooked food.
Yeah.
And I would say I would probably date that after Pierre Bourdieu's work, which was a French sociologist. His work gets translated in English in 1984, and then it becomes kind of quite important in sociology. In anthropology, food had been studied largely, in some ways, the food practices of non literate people in often remote areas, isolated areas. And people often react to anthropological work by saying, if an anthropology comes to study me, that means I'm kind of some kind of a dead end. So in some ways, I had not been exposed to kind of good, serious thinking on food, and especially about in kind of food sociology and the practices of urban migrants. So when I started studying this, of course, I was initially, your questions in grad school often are too big. I want to study immigrants, immigrant foodways. Does it change? How does it change? And how does it matter to people? And
Mhm.
then I realized that immigrants is a very big category. So I
Yeah.
have to reduce it to some kind of immigrants, and that would probably be useful if I could speak some of the languages, because most immigrants, as kind of most important part about food is it is so quotidian, so in some ways unself-conscious, that it's often not available to especially a second or a third language, in this case English. So because I knew my mother tongue is Odia. My mother is from Odisha. My father tongue is Bengali. And I spent time in Delhi, so I had obviously learned Hindi. So I wanted to narrow it down to a group of people with whom I could share a language that is kind of more commonsensical every day. I ended up with Bengali Americans because my aunt, who was the only one here in the United States, took me to a conference, Bengali Association of North America, and they were selling a $10 booklet on all the people who were registered in their organization. I spent $10. That was probably the best $10 I've spent. I don't think I would have done my PhD without it. So I ended up talking to a survey of about 126 households. I went and cooked and listened to people in about 40 households. And I would say, do you want me to talk a little bit about what I found in that
Yeah, sure.
study?
Yeah, absolutely.
So most dramatically, I would say when I asked folks, does food matter to you? People said yes, but there was always a qualifying thing. The qualifying thing was eventually I gathered they said, well, I can eat Thai food
Hmm.
and I can eat Chinese food the day after. I
Yeah.
can eat, but that doesn't change my culture. So it's like attire or it's like acquiring a second or a third
Hmm.
language. They said food is to me lot more like attire than like religion or marrying someone. You do it once in your lifetime,
Hmm.
ideally.
Yeah.
And so for me, that kind of that was an important qualifier. And most importantly, in my case, I think I saw breakfast had changed, had become dramatically for this immigrant group of Bengalis.
Yeah.
Breakfast had become mostly North American cereal, industrial cereal, toast, and tea, while dinner had become much more conservative. So, in a sense, as I talked to people, breakfast became a way in which immigrants, in some ways, I thought, were preparing themselves to get out into the American world. And dinner was, in a way, in which they shut the door on the American world, a lot more traditional and a lot more gender division of labor.
But I never thought of it like that because I was just thinking about breakfast is probably because there's less time and you're on the go. But it's a very interesting way to think about how you're getting out into the world. And very often the chai becomes a coffee.